Welcome to a special interview segment of The Breakdown here at the Alberta Legislature. We're here today with Kelly Rudyk.
Correct.
And we're here to talk about a budgeting model that isn't necessarily utilized, and maybe that it should. So to start off with, Kelly, we're talking about priority-based budgeting.
Correct, yeah,
Okay.
that's the right term.
So pretend that I'm not an economist.
All right.
I'm not an economist. What is
That's okay, I won't hold it against you.
I appreciate that. What is priority-based budgeting?
So it's a budgeting methodology that, in my estimation, is the best at aligning goals of an organization, or for our purposes, the province or a municipality, aligning their goals with what it is they do and their citizens. So what do citizens want? What are you doing to achieve those things? And allocating your resources towards achieving those things. Instead of, you might have heard of results-based budgeting, which is what the province uses right now. Every ministry has some results that they want to achieve, but there's no overlying right now plan for the province and for the citizens. It's gotten a little bit, there's silos in the ministries right now. So priority-based budgeting, tries to align resources towards achieving goals for citizens' sake.
Okay. Operationally, how does it, to the layperson, how would you explain how it works differently than traditional models?
Yeah, okay. So year-to-year budgeting right now, whether it's incremental budgeting, which traditionally what you do is you take what you did last year and you apply some inflationary factors to the resources that are needed to make those things happen. Maybe something's happened in the environment around you, like a big pandemic or something that might have some implications on your costs or what you can do with your labor force. As opposed to taking that bundle of everything you did last year and trying to recreate it the next year, you challenge yourself to say, okay, how well are those things that we do aligning with the things that we've said we want to achieve in as far as goal statements and results?
Okay.
Yeah.
What are the benefits of priority-based budgeting over traditional methods?
So I implemented, our team in Strathcona County implemented priority-based budgeting, and that's, of course, municipal environment.
So this isn't even just theoretical. This is something
No,
that has
this is something that actually has been used a couple of hundred times south of the border. So predominantly an American methodology that's trying to kind of make its way north of the border. Actually, Capital Region, there's a few municipalities that are doing it after following Strathcona County's lead. St. Albert, Fort Saskatchewan, those come to mind. So the difference in incremental budgeting towards priority-based budgeting is, so you're always mining for where your most value lies. Okay. So you judge what you're doing and how much impact it has on achieving goals, as opposed to taking what you did last year and finding a way to maybe arbitrarily add to it to recreate the same thing. Or in our instances, let's say you've heard these things from municipalities before, or councils, where they say, well, we don't want any more than a 3% increase in our taxes.
Okay.
Very arbitrary, right? So a really good example for me in Strathcona County was our fire services used PBB to kind of look at what they were doing. And they found an area which they were actually in direct competition with someone privately in the community that was providing first aid services. So they said to themselves, well, not only is it something that might not be aligning as well as maybe some other things that we're doing, but we're in direct competition with the private provider in our community. So that came forward as a candidate to maybe repurpose and reallocate what was traditionally going into that area into something more valuable, as opposed to asking for more the next year to recreate everything as it was the year before.
Okay.
So it forgoes maybe future tax increases by repurposing and reallocating what you already have.
was there a tangible return on investment? Because I imagine rather than just copying and pasting last year's budget to this year and making a few small changes, which seems to be how a lot of municipalities and provincial governments traditionally do their budgeting.
Right.
What sort of return on investment did Strathcona County see for implementing priority-based budgeting?
So I'd be lying if I said it was the only factor, but Strathcona County was able to have 2 years subsequent of tax decreases.
So they were actually able to decrease taxes to the citizens.
Right, and it was one of the factors. Now, we all know Strathcona County has some assessment that others don't, so they have some industry, which obviously has helped out on the revenue side. But if you're taking that bundle of things the year before, so all things being equal, they still were able to see a tax decrease 2 years in a row using that tool and using that methodology. And it's kind of a culture that you start breeding in your organization to start mining for where all the value is. And you know what? It requires some leadership as well for people to say, in my area, I'm willing to give up maybe some resources or some staff vacancies to reallocate somewhere else where there's more value in the organization.
Do you see, like most of the examples that you used there were municipal, is it something that would be scalable to a provincial level?
So yeah, sometimes that's the argument, is that we're too big or we're too set, like the culture is too hard to change.
Okay.
And
that sounds like it goes back to the leadership thing that you were talking about.
this is it, right? It's an ingredient that really helps out success. So I know Edmonton's been musing about it. Actually, they used to do it.
Okay.
Province has been, they have a methodology that isn't incremental, that they've placed a lot of weight in, which is results-based budgeting. It is absolutely scalable. So think about Strathcona County has a $300 million budget approximately, maybe $350 now. Edmonton has $3 billion. The province, I mean, how many ministries do we have? How many multiple billions of dollars do we have? Even if you tried to pilot this in some sort of scenario where it's one ministry trying it out and demonstrating results, that might be the way for a big beast that is, a provincial government to think about something like this. I talk about ingredients for success, leadership being one of them. You need a strong strategic plan that has some really well-defined goals in them. The province, in my mind, has not had a really good provincial-wide goal, strategic plan with goals in it, maybe since Premier Stelmach. And Premier Stelmach reached across the partisan lines, asked someone like Anne McClellan to help out with that effort. Still have copies of it in my office. I think it was really well done. Hint, hint. But you know what? It's some leadership stamina. It's some leadership within these siloed areas too, to think corporate first or province first instead of my area. But it's been done successfully before, so you're not recreating the wheel. You've got someone in the region here would be very willing to talk to anybody who would want to listen about the merits of it. So.
Okay. How reactive is it? I mean, one of the big things that we've definitely seen in Alberta in the last 6 months or so was the provincial government released a budget that was predicated on oil prices that were, let's say, optimistic,
yeah,
and certainly unrealized to this point. And then we had the whole reality of COVID come home. Yeah. So we're seeing lots of delays from this provincial government in regards to being able to produce financials for what things are going to look like. Does priority-based budgeting have any sort of increased flexibility for dealing with those kinds of things? Because certainly even in Calgary, where I'm from, we saw with the major hailstorms that just rolled through there, there's no shortage of unexpected events in Alberta that come with a pretty significant price tag.
Yeah, so it is robust enough and resilient enough that I mentioned St. Albert before.
Yeah.
I just talked to one of their staff members. They used PBB principles to make COVID-related decisions in their organization. So okay. COVID has hit us. Where do we have to look in our organization? Where can we repurpose, reallocate? Where can we move people around to address this very prominent situation right now without maybe asking for more or asking for emergent resolutions for more dollars. If you're presented with a challenge if you don't have these long-term goals or something hits you like a storm that we're facing right now, or the provincial issues that we're facing, the principles of mining for value and finding out where you're getting your most bang for your buck still apply. So it's named priority-based budgeting. I think that's kind of maybe should be named something differently, because people think it's only a budget tool.
Okay.
But it's really used, like I said, with those other elements of strategic planning, et cetera, or something hits you. It's really just digging in and finding out what you do and where the most value is and trying to align to that value.
Now, we've talked a bit about successful examples where priority-based budgeting has been implemented. To play devil's advocate, are there any examples where there have been negative outcomes from organizations or municipalities or whatever the case may be, where they've used priority-based budgeting and they've had negative outcomes?
So I don't think negative outcomes, but I would say, I'll use Edmonton for example. They mused about using it several years ago. They started down the road. And you need some strong support in your executive leadership. You need some strong support on council, because this is a culture change. And one of the things that priority-based budgeting does is it identifies, like I said, what you do. So in a big organization like the City of Edmonton, when you start doing a little bit more of that forensic look as an organization, and you come up with, I think at the time they did this, they said they did 1,200 different lines of business. The tool starts to break down.
Okay.
So what probably should have happened in that instance was they should have looked at themselves and said, let's wear a citizen hat and not an internal client hat. What do we do for the citizens? Because I would garner a guess that citizens don't have any appetite for talking to you about 1,200 things that you do. If you could roll it up a little bit into maybe a few hundred, which is what Strathcona County got it down to, then using the tool doesn't become so onersome it's an onerous effort internally, and that's when you're trying to sell something new and it becomes labored like that.
Yeah.
It just can't get that momentum to really take hold. So that's not to call out the effort before. I'm glad City of Edmonton did that. It's probably a reason why it resonated with me, is because someone in the region was doing it and they went out there and they tried it. I think right now they're thinking about doing it again.
Okay.
City police here have kept kind of that mindset in their organization internally. So, maybe they'll revisit it. But to say that it was a failure, I think would be wrong. I don't know of too many that it has been an outright failure, because somewhere in your organization, it's probably led to somebody thinking that way. And maybe instead of automatically asking for more, they're mining for value themselves.
To a layperson, what would you say would be the biggest thing that you'd like them to understand about the differences between the two? I mean, one of the challenges that we certainly see in this province is that we have these complex ideas, and a lot of, I know that I struggle when it comes to numbers and budgets. My wife will attest to that. So what are the biggest takeaways that you would want people to understand about priority-based budgeting?
Sure. I would say, again, back to something I said before, don't think of it as a budget tool. Think of it as a decision-making tool. So hopefully what would resonate with people and with citizens is, and I know I hear this all the time, what do I get for my taxes? Really, it's just a different conversation that you can have with your constituents around listening to them, on what they want. I think we all understand that if we want things, we have to pay for them, yes. But if you genuinely listen to what they want and you have that stamina to say, we're not going to be all things to all people, and in a priority-based world, not everything is a priority, right? So some things will have to give to make other things a priority, right? So if you truly then sit down and have a mature conversation with the public to say, look, we just can't be all things to all people. We're going to try to get the most value for the taxes that you're paying. It may mean that 2% of you will be screaming at me next time we're coming to ask for your vote. But I did my best to get the most value out of the dollars that I could possibly get.
Are you still with Strathcona County?
No, I probably a little bit to do with priority-based budgeting, but February of 2019, I just felt compelled to maybe tell this story more broadly, and wondered what the other side of the equation would look like. So in a private enterprise, so I started my own sole proprietor company.
Okay.
And I'd been getting a lot of calls internally about priority-based budgeting from other municipalities, and I was helping them out as much as I could as an employee of Strathcona County. But now I get to go and talk to people and spend a lot of time with them and really get to know them and have a little bit of a relationship with them instead of just a phone call and off you go, hopefully you're successful sort of thing.
One other question, just to clarify. This is not a model that is only limited to municipalities. This can work with other organizations, or?
So interestingly enough, it's been used lots in municipal environment, and that's what I know the best. However, I've went out and I've used it for a nonprofit. I've went out and used it for, I'm talking to little pockets of the province right now, people that I know. And I just actually started down the road of applying the principles in a family situation.
Okay.
So, same kind of thing. Families have a limited amount of resources year to year. Have they ever sat down and said, as a family, what do we want to achieve 10, 15, 20 years from now? And is what we're doing aligning to what we want to achieve? And so I did that for my family. I have another one that I'm working with right now, all trying to build some sort of model that I can then maybe add some value at the family level, because the principles are strong across many different areas for sure.
Are there any possible applications for the corporate world?
Absolutely. So especially nowadays, when I think there's this move towards the corporate social responsibility end of things, and there's some really progressive thinking companies who might have those goals that are not just fiscally related, right? So if there's someone who has, staff empowerment or community building in their plans, absolutely. I mean, it could be applied anywhere.
If people want to know, I mean, you're acting as a consultant now with your sole proprietorship.
Yeah.
If people want to know more about your consulting, if they want to know more about priority-based budgeting in general, A, where do they get a hold of you? And B, what are some good resources for them to look into?
Sure. So my company's called It's Logical Strategic Planning Services. Website's www.itslogical.ca. I'll share with you all my credentials after, and maybe that could be shared. There's a center who created priority-based budgeting in Denver, Colorado as well.
Okay.
And they've evolved to a company called ResourceX. And they have some really cool analytical tools and some software packages around this that it's some really cool stuff. They geek out on it like crazy. And so love those guys. Have a strong relationship and partnership with them, actually. So that's ResourceX out of Denver, Colorado. You could Google them. You'll find all sorts of information. You'll find all sorts of places in the States that have done this.
Okay.
Like San Jose, California. They're working with Denver, Colorado right now. I think they've implemented it maybe 200 plus times.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, yeah, it's not new. It's new to us, I think, north of the border still, but it's really they've done some amazing work.
Well, certainly, given the challenging economic and fiscal environment that we see in Alberta right now, hearing that there's municipalities that have actually been able to cut back on their property taxes, I can see that this would definitely be something that a lot of people would potentially be interested in knowing more about. So
For sure.
Thank you so much for taking the time to come down and chat with us today.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Very much. I'd shake your hand, but the COVID.
Right, yeah.
So thank you again.
Yeah.
And I look forward to chatting with you again about this, hopefully.
Good stuff. Thanks
Awesome.
for the opportunity.
Thank
Great
you.
chat.